We've given away $5 million over the last 5 years. And yes, every year it gets increasingly difficult to affirmatively.
Moments ago, shocking reports surfaced about Mike Rowe, the beloved host of Dirty Jobs, and what investigators found inside his home has left fans completely stunned. For years, Mike has been admired for his down-to-earth attitude, tireless work ethic, and his ability to shine a light on the hard-working men and women who keep America running. But behind the scenes, few people truly knew what his private life looked like. Until now. Sources close to the television icon have revealed unexpected details about what was recently uncovered inside Rowe's residence. And the truth is something no one saw coming. Fans who have followed his journey from Dirty Jobs to Somebody's Gotta Do It thought they knew everything about him. The humor, the humility, and the heart. But what was found inside his house tells a completely different story about the man behind the camera. When officials arrived to conduct what was initially described as a routine inspection, they never expected to stumble upon a discovery that would raise so many questions. Within minutes, word began spreading across social media. What did they find in Mike Rowe's home? The answer has since set off a wave of speculation, debate, and disbelief among fans and media outlets alike. While Rowe has always been transparent about his values and lifestyle, this recent revelation paints a far more personal picture of who he really is. And once the full story came out, even those closest to him were reportedly caught off guard by what they learned. So what exactly did they find? Why has this discovery shaken fans to their core? And how has Mike Rowe himself responded to the news that's now making headlines everywhere? Stay with us, because what was found inside Mike Rowe's house might just change how you see him forever. For over 2 decades, Mike Rowe has been one of the most trusted and relatable figures on television. As the host of Dirty Jobs, he built his reputation not on glamour or fame, but on humility, rolling up his sleeves and diving headfirst into some of the toughest, dirtiest, and most dangerous work imaginable. From cleaning sewers to shearing sheep, Rowe earned the respect of millions by showing that dignity and pride can be found in every honest day's work. That's why, when reports surfaced about an unexpected discovery inside his home, fans were left in disbelief. It seemed impossible that a man so open, so genuine, could be hiding something that would send shockwaves through both Hollywood and his loyal fan base. But what investigators stumbled upon wasn't criminal, scandalous, or shameful. It was emotional, unexpected, and profoundly revealing about who Mike Rowe truly is. According to those close to the situation, the story began when a small team was conducting a safety and maintenance inspection on Rowe's property, a modest home that, much like the man himself, was known for its simplicity. They expected a routine visit, but when they stepped into his private study, they found something completely unanticipated. Hundreds of personal letters, photographs, and handwritten journals dating back decades. Each one, it turns out, told a story, not of celebrity, but of gratitude. Rowe had quietly kept every fan letter he'd ever received since Dirty Jobs first aired in 2003. Many were from farmers, mechanics, sanitation workers, welders, and veterans, people who saw themselves reflected in his show. In his private notes, Rowe had written responses he never mailed, messages of thanks, admiration, and even apologies for not being able to reply to everyone. One journal entry, dated over 10 years ago, read, "The best part of this job isn't the cameras or the travel. It's hearing from people who finally feel seen. Every dirty job tells a story, not just about work, but about worth." The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a celebrity's home. It was a living archive of Mike Rowe's life mission. There were handwritten blueprints and ideas for his foundation, Mike Rowe Works, a charity dedicated to promoting skilled labor and trade education. Stacks of thank you cards from scholarship. Recipients were carefully preserved alongside personal reflections about his parents and childhood. Investigators also found something that moved even the toughest crew members to silence, a small, worn wooden box in the corner of his study. Inside were tokens from jobs he'd done over the years, a rusted bolt from a shipyard, a miner's helmet, a faded work glove, and even a tiny jar of dirt labeled First Episode. 2 and 3. To anyone else, it might look like junk. But to Rowe, it was a timeline of the people and places that defined his journey. What struck everyone most was how little of this had ever been shared publicly. Despite having every reason to boast, Mike Rowe had chosen to keep these deeply personal reminders tucked away, not for attention, but for meaning. When the news broke about what had been found, fans initially braced for scandal. Instead, what emerged was a portrait of humility. The discovery revealed that behind the camera and the easy smile was a man who never forgot where he came from, or who he was doing it all for. In a later statement, Rowe addressed the media attention with his trademark humor and grace. "I suppose if you dig around my house long enough, you'll find proof that I'm a sentimental old fool," he said. "Those letters remind me that this country is filled with extraordinary people doing ordinary work, and that's something worth holding on to. It wasn't a secret stash of riches or a scandalous collection. It was a quiet treasure, trove of gratitude, legacy, and love for the American worker. And yet, as touching as this revelation was, it was only the beginning. Because among those journals and keepsakes lay something even more personal. A letter Mike Rowe had written to himself years ago, sealed and forgotten. Until now. When word spread about the heartwarming discovery inside Mike Rowe's home, fans were already deeply moved by his collection of letters, journals, and mementos. But few knew that among those items lay something far more personal, something Rowe himself may have forgotten existed. Hidden at the bottom of a drawer inside his wooden desk was a sealed envelope, yellowed with age, marked simply with 3 words in his handwriting, "For when it's time." The envelope immediately caught the attention of those cataloging the contents of his study. Unlike the other letters, addressed to fans, friends, and family, this one was different. It wasn't mailed, signed, or labeled for anyone else. It was meant for Mike himself. When Rowe later confirmed its authenticity, he revealed that he had written it more than 15 years earlier, at a time when his career was uncertain and his future unclear. Inside was a 2-page handwritten letter, a message from a younger Mike Rowe to the man he hoped to become. The words inside, simple yet deeply emotional, painted a picture of a man struggling to stay grounded in an industry that often rewards ego over effort. He began with humility. "If you're reading this, it means you made it, or at least you're still standing. Don't let success make you forget who you are or where you came from. Remember the coal miners, the welders, the farmers? They were the reason you started dirty jobs in the first place." The letter continued with reflections that revealed how much Rowe feared losing his sense of purpose. He reminded himself never to chase fame or fortune, but connection. If the cameras ever go away, keep telling their stories. Work doesn't define you, but the way you honor work does. Those who've followed Mike Rowe's career know how prophetic those words were. Over the years, he has become one of America's strongest advocates for skilled labor, using his platform to champion dignity and hard work. From his foundation to his public speaking, every project has echoed the same message he wrote to himself in that forgotten letter, that every job, no matter how dirty, has value. Perhaps the most touching part of the letter came near the end. There, Rowe had written a note about his parents, who were both major influences on his life. "Mom and Dad taught you to respect everyone, from the janitor to the CEO. If you ever forget that lesson, go back home. Sit at the kitchen table. Listen, that's where the real stories live." It was a glimpse into the deep gratitude that has always defined Mike Rowe. The letter wasn't written for show or legacy. It was a promise to himself. And finding it after all these years, tucked away in the quiet corner of his home, brought that promise full circle. When asked about it later, Rowe smiled and said, "I wrote that letter when I was still trying to figure out who I was in this business. Turns out the guy who wrote it knew a lot more than I did." Fans across the country reacted with admiration and emotion. Social media was flooded with messages like, "Mike, Rowe just keeps proving he's the real deal," and "That letter should be required. Reading for anyone chasing success, but The discovery didn't just reaffirm Mike's authenticity, it also revealed why he remains so beloved after all these years. In a time when fame often changes people, Rowe has stayed exactly who he promised himself he'd be: humble, honest, and deeply connected to everyday Americans. Even his longtime colleagues weren't surprised by what the letter said. One former Dirty Jobs producer recalled, "Mike never played a character. What you saw on screen, that was him." Finding that letter just confirmed what we already knew. In the end, the hidden letter wasn't just a personal note. It was a roadmap for how to live a life of purpose and integrity. And as fans reflected on its message, one truth became clear: Mike Rowe never needed fame to define him. He only needed honesty, gratitude, and a deep respect for the people who keep the world running. But just when it seemed like the story had come to a touching close, a second discovery inside his home revealed something even more extraordinary, a tribute that would bring both laughter and tears to his most devoted fans, just when everyone thought the story behind Mike Rowe's home couldn't get any more emotional. Another discovery came to light, one that revealed a side of him even his closest friends hadn't seen. Among the boxes of letters, journals, and memorabilia tucked away in his study, a small door behind one of the bookcases caught the attention of the inspection crew. It wasn't immediately noticeable: no handle, no visible hinges, just a faint outline in the wooden wall. When they gently pressed on it, the panel swung open, revealing a hidden room that few, if any, people knew existed. Inside was a space that could only be described as a personal museum, a tribute to the American worker. The room wasn't luxurious or extravagant. It was humble, almost rustic, filled with worn tools, photographs, uniforms, and handwritten notes from men and women across the country who had inspired Mike Rowe throughout his career. Every item had a story, and every story had a name. There was an old pair of steel-toed boots from a coal miner in West Virginia who'd once told Mike that Dirty Jobs made him proud of his life's work. Next to them hung a faded cap from a fisherman in Alaska, signed with a simple message: "Thanks for showing the world what we really do out here." In one corner sat a shelf lined with small glass jars, each labeled with the location and date of a different Dirty Jobs episode. Everything from Alabama septic tank to Texas cattle ranch, but the most touching part of the room was a large wooden sign mounted on the back wall. Carved into it were the words, "This room belongs to the people who never quit." Below the sign hung a framed photo of Mike Rowe standing beside his father, both smiling and covered in dirt from a long day's work. Beneath it was a handwritten note in his father's penmanship: "Son, no matter how far you go, remember the ones who build the road." That small tribute, hidden from public view, was the beating heart of Mike Rowe's home. It wasn't built for cameras, guests, or attention. It was a quiet sanctuary, a reminder of why he did what he did. When news of the hidden room broke, fans were deeply moved. It wasn't the kind of secret people expected from a celebrity. There were no lavish collections, no signs of ego or extravagance. Instead, it was a tribute to everyone who had inspired him: the plumbers, farmers, truck drivers, welders, and janitors who formed the backbone of America. In an interview shortly after the story surfaced, Rowe was characteristically humble. "It's not really a secret room," he said with a grin. "It's just a space where I keep a few reminders of why this journey matters. The people I met over the years gave me more than I could ever repay. That room helps me remember that." Colleagues from Dirty Jobs weren't surprised either. Mike always said the show wasn't about him, one producer shared. It was about everyone else. He believed that if you shine a light on ordinary people long enough, you realize there's nothing ordinary about them. Even after years in the public eye, Rowe's dedication to that message has never wavered. Through his Mike Rowe Works Foundation, he's helped thousands of students pursue training in skilled trades: mechanics, electricians, welders, and more, continuing to bridge the gap between hard work and respect. The hidden room inside his home wasn't just a collection of artifacts. It was a visual reflection of his soul: humble, hard-working, and endlessly grateful. What made it all the more touching was how private it had remained. Rowe had never mentioned it in interviews or documentaries. It wasn't created for publicity. It existed purely for reflection, a quiet place where he could step away from fame and reconnect with the people who made his life's work possible. As one longtime friend put it, that room isn't about nostalgia, it's about gratitude. Mike built his career telling other people's stories, and in that space he keeps them alive. Yet, within that same room, one final discovery would surface, a recording that captured Mike Rowe's rawest, most emotional moment ever caught on tape. As word spread about the hidden tribute room inside Mike Rowe's home, few could imagine there was still more to uncover. But tucked away in the far corner of that quiet space, beneath a stack of old journals and photo albums, was a small, dust-covered tape recorder. Next to it, a handwritten label read, "For those who care to listen." When the contents of the recording were played, what came through wasn't a scripted speech or a polished message. It was Mike's voice, quiet, thoughtful, and deeply personal. What began as a simple reflection soon turned into an emotional revelation that would move even the toughest hearts. In the recording, Mike spoke about the weight of the stories he had carried over the years, the long days filming dirty jobs, the countless people he met who worked with pride but rarely received recognition. "I've shaken hands with men whose names the world will never know," he said softly. "But I'll remember them forever. Because every time I got my hands dirty, I got a little closer to understanding what America is really made of." He paused for several seconds before continuing. The sound of his voice cracked slightly as he spoke again. "You can live in a world that celebrates fame and still find heroes who want none of it. The ones who don't chase cameras, followers, or glory, just an honest day's work. That's who this room is for. That's who I'm still working for." Listeners could hear him take a deep breath, then the sound of faint laughter as he admitted, "I never thought dirty jobs would become what it did. I just wanted to show that dignity doesn't wear a suit and tie. It wears boots." Then came the moment that brought everyone who heard it to tears. Rowe began talking about his father, the man who inspired his work ethic, humility, and gratitude. "My dad taught me that there's no such thing as a small job," Mike said. "He used to come home covered in grease, exhausted but proud. And he'd look at me and say, 'If you can do something useful for someone else today, you've done enough.' I didn't understand that when I was a kid. I do now." At that point, the recording grew quiet again. Then, almost in a whisper, he added, "I built this room for him, and for everyone like him, because the world forgets people like my dad too easily. I never will." When the audio clip made its way online, it spread like wildfire. Fans, co-workers, and even those who had only casually followed his career shared it across social media, calling it the most real thing Mike Rowe has ever said. Thousands of comments poured in, from mechanics, farmers, teachers, and truck drivers, all thanking him for reminding them that their work mattered. The emotional weight of that message hit home for many who felt unseen in their daily grind. One user wrote, "I've watched him for years, but hearing this made me feel like he was talking to me personally. No one says thank you to people like us anymore. Mike just did." When asked about the viral recording in a later interview, Mike smiled humbly. "I didn't record it for the world to hear," he said. "It was just something I needed to say out loud, maybe for myself, maybe for my dad. But if it helped someone feel proud of what they do, then I guess it was meant to be found." In that one simple tape, the world got to see the man behind the camera. Not the TV host, not the celebrity, but the son, the friend, the worker who still believed that character and kindness mattered more than fame. The recording wasn't about shock value or headlines. It was about gratitude and a reminder that humility still has a voice. And that's what made what they found in Mike Rowe's house truly shocking. Not because it exposed scandal or secrets, but because it revealed a heart full of sincerity in a world that too often forgets what honesty sounds like.